We are talking to Andrew Jones, the publisher of Tar Heel Illustrated, which is part of the Rivals.com network. Big game this week with UNC traveling to play NC State at 7 p.m. Friday night on ESPN. And obviously, both fan bases have been following each other's teams pretty closely this season. And there's been a lot of discussion on the NC State message boards about UNC's defense or lack thereof at times. You know, what is your kind of feel on what has happened with UNC's defense? Is it younger players that are learning and taking their lumps, or is there just a few pieces that are just simply missing? And obviously NC State has a pretty explosive offense when things are clicking.
Well, I think it's all the above and more. I think there are a lot of issues that Carolina has on defense. And I guess you could say it begins with some of the youth, but let's face it, they had a 5-year, Tamon Fox played over 3,000 snaps. He's been out there every game this year. Jeremiah Gemmell's a 3-year starter. Trey Morrison's a 4-year starter in the back of that defense. It's not like they're rolling out a bunch of 19-year-olds and just seeing how things go. Reva Hossick's 23 years old. He starts on the defensive line. They have older guys. They have experienced guys. Connor McMichael's in his 4th year of college. So they have youth in some key spots, and I think a lot of their depth is youth. And that becomes an issue when you start losing guys, and they've lost 4 or 5. They've lost 4 DBs now for the season. But NC State knows what that's all about, and the Wolfpack can certainly handle losing important defensive players and continue to chug along. So I think a lot of it. A lot of people say it's scheme, and I'm not going to go there just yet. But I do think at times this team has a tendency of they don't wrap up very well. They go through periods of a lot of missed tackles. They go through periods where they have terrible penalties. You know, they get a stop at Notre Dame on 4th down. It's a face mask call, and it was at the 30-yard line. What does Notre Dame do in the next play? They score a touchdown. Things like that have happened to this defense where they have been situationally awful. And it's not just the scheme. It's not just the youth. It's not just maybe injuries in certain spots. It's they simply make really bad plays at the wrong time and allow what would be a 3rd and 11 stop to turn into a 1st down and a team scores 4 plays later. It's amazing, JC, the big 15-yard penalties they've committed on defense this year, and how quickly soon after the opponent has not just gotten points, but scored touchdowns. They don't handle in-game adversity well. They don't handle in-possession adversity well. And they have a terrific leader in Gemmell. But I just think that communication issues, which are a huge problem in pre-snap, and then just not making that one terrible play that just snowballs has been a big problem of theirs. They've been pretty good at times, but they've been really bad more often than they've been pretty good. And I think that as a whole, after 11 games, you get an idea of what a team is. And I think defensively, this team has tremendous issues. And NC State is certainly an offense capable of picking apart an opponent's issues. And I think that Carolina, because that, has an enormous task at hand Friday night.
And a lot of NC State fans watched the Wake Forest UNC game, which the Tar Heels ended up pulling out 58-55, I believe. Then obviously NC State goes and plays at Wake Forest, loses 45-42. So there's a lot of memories, fresh memories about playing Wake Forest, I'm guessing, for both programs.
Yeah.
But what did you kind of take away from the UNC win over Wake that might transfer over to playing NC State?
I mean, Carolina scored points.
Mm-hmm.
And Wake's defense isn't NC State's defense. I think it's a testament to Dave Clawson and that team that they somehow scored 45 points against NC State, because I thought State did a good job against Hartman. Every time I looked up,
he was a little
Drake
off
Thomas,
that game at times.
Yeah, every time I looked up, Drake Thomas or somebody's in his face. They're making a move. They made him look uncomfortable, and they still scored 45 points. Carolina has an issue protecting Sam Howell. He's been sacked 39 times this year. I think NC State has an opportunity to tee off on him and tee off on that passing game and make it a short game and take away the long ball by not giving Sam time to go through any of those progressions or guys get open. So I don't know if I have a whole lot I could take away from those 2 games. I think that Wake and State are very, very different teams. And I believe that if State and Wake played 10 times, the Wolfpack would win 6 of those times. They just didn't win that night. I liked what I saw from State. I was just amazed that, man, Clawson's that good a coach. And Hartman still made plays, which is pretty amazing because he did not have a great game, but he still found a way to make some plays. I think that Sam Howell is that kind of guy for Carolina. State can play very well defensively, but Sam makes stuff happen with his legs, with his arm, with his toughness, with his craftiness. But they don't think they have the options, the number of options that Wake has. They've got Josh Downs. If you bottle him up, which is very hard to do, Carolina hasn't really had anybody else step up consistently. Antoine Green's played pretty well of late. They're trying to get some young kids out there. Ty Chandler has been really good at running back, but they haven't thrown to him a whole lot. So I think the key is, putting Sam on his back and banging him up and making him dirty. And State does that. The Wolfpack should score enough points on the other side of the ball. They should win. But I think for Carolina, what you could take away is the fact that the Tar Heels were down 17 and kept fighting. And, they had a situation where Notre Dame could have put them away and didn't. Pitt appeared to have them put away in the first half and didn't. Carolina has one thing that has been really impressive and consistent all year, with the exception of Atlanta, is they have a lot of resiliency. They have fought a lot. They have clawed back into games. And you don't kind of think of this program as the fighting, clawing back kind of program. Mm-hmm. You think of it as a little bit more finesse, but they've shown some mental toughness in coming back at some of these games. And let's face it, they're in a stretch where their last 4 P5 games are Notre Dame, Pitt, and State on the road, and Wake at home. They lost to Pitt in overtime. They were right there in the last minute and a half in South Bend, and they beat Wake. So I think that they should be competitive this weekend, but they just make too many mistakes on defense. The defense doesn't get enough stops, and I think that that's ultimately going to be why they lose this game.
Sure. And I'm going to give a little background on this next question. So NC State is trying to win at home, be undefeated at home for the first time in like 35 years or something. They obviously want to be in a position where if Wake Forest loses to Boston College on Saturday, that they could represent the Atlantic Division. They clearly go head to head on UNC with recruits on the, younger kids, maybe not so much in the class of 2022 because that's done. But, this is the type of game that gets the attention of the 2023 class, 2024 class. All that being said, UNC is the one that has the role of being a spoiler because there's really not that much left for them to achieve from a distance. It doesn't look like they're bowl eligible. They'll play somewhere. They'll play somebody. It won't be like a big bowl game, but maybe it'll be some bowl game that wants TV ratings. So they'll match up 2 teams that are, in that 6-6, 7-5 range. But that being said, obviously UNC knows how much they could spoil NC State's dreams this Friday. How has that vibe been around the program or with the fan base?
Well, they're pretty good at being PC over there about a lot of things, and I don't think you're going to get much bulletin board material. Sam Howell says, yeah, it's important. It's important to fans. We understand all that. Mac Brown talked about it on Monday as well. But I think that this club, I think the message within the walls of the Keenum Football Center is just get better. I don't think they're going to get these kids all amped up to try to spoil NC State's season because their season has been so disappointing given what the expectations were. And it's not just us in the media who applied those expectations. We're reading the tea leaves of the program. We're listening to what the program is saying, and they were building things up pretty high. And so the expectations were a combination of a lot of things. So yeah, they have had a disappointing season, and they're at a point where I think they just want to get better. And they reached that point sometime in October. I think it was after the Florida State loss when they were miserable. And they had no excuse losing a game like that, getting blown up in the middle 2 quarters the way the defense did. I think they kind of reset things a little bit. Said, okay, let's just get better every week. And about a month ago, Max started talking about the rest of this season is a connection to spring and is a connection to next year. And he said multiple times, we're going to be better next year. So I do think that will matter maybe for guys like Gimmel and Fox and Morrison, the older players, because they want to, maybe try to leave their college careers with a little extra nudge at NC State. But I really believe that the whole mission for the younger guys is just get better. They're going to play some younger guys, get on the field, get a taste at a great environment against a really good team that does things well in all phases. So I think really that's the bigger deal right now than getting all amped up about ruining NC State. Now, if they beat NC State, and let's say Wake loses, and State blows an opportunity to win the Atlantic. I think that they'll talk about that publicly and get a lot of satisfaction out of that, but I don't think that's their burning mission going in.
Sure. And then obviously a lot of talk about, is this Sam Howell's last game, last season, last whatever. Didn't play against Wofford due to an injury. Obviously, most people assume he'll play Friday. I don't have any inside info on that, but who knows if Sam will even play in the bowl game when that day comes. But there's a lot of respect for what Sam has had to do, and I think it's clear he's had to shoulder a load, no pun intended, more than people realize. Losing the different guys that they lost to the NFL. Now Josh Downs has been fantastic, and Chandler has been better than expected, I think. But how much has Sam had to do to carry this offense with his arm and his legs this season?
I think you can make an argument that Sam has been better this year than the last 2 years. And I say that knowing full well what the last play against Virginia Tech looked like. And I say that knowing full well that he threw a pick on the last play at Pitt. And I say that knowing full well that he fumbled multiple times in Atlanta, and that was disastrous because that was part of the explosion when Georgia Tech ran over them. However, like you said, shouldering the load is an understatement. They went through a period where I have no idea how they were able to get the ball in the end zone. It was Sam and Josh. Josh, by the way, his dad was a really good player at NC State, Gary Downs. And it's amazing looking back that the offense was able to navigate through what they did because they weren't very good, but they were still producing enough. It's just the defense didn't give them any opportunities to win. And that's Sam. That's Sam's grit, his guts, his skill, his mental toughness, and the fact that he's a gamer. I mean, Sam is an unbelievable. You know this, JC. I covered Russell Wilson, and I've compared Sam to Russell in a lot of ways in their personality and their approach, their faith, the fact that they're so tunnel vision with life. I think they're similar players in a lot of ways. And Russell gritted through a lot of stuff at NC State. That the 2-yard Hail Mary against Carolina is a classic example, right? That's the kind of play Sam Howell can make, because he's cut out of a very similar mold. By the way, both baseball players, although Russell was a better baseball player for sure. So I love that about Sam. I love covering guys that make crap, chicken salad out of chicken crap. You know what I mean? And Sam's one of those kind of guys. The fact that he has 727 yards rushing, and he's been sacked 39 times. And if he had no sacks, he'd be very close to running for 1,000 yards this year. That's amazing. He's had 5 games he's run for 100 yards. In Carolina history, that only happened a couple of times previously where a quarterback threw for 300 and ran for 100 in a game, and he's done it like 4 times this year. He's had to do it. They've had no choice but for him to take a beating because of the sacks, because of the RPOs, when a lot of stuff's not there because the run blocking at times hasn't been great, and he's had to pull it and run himself from the faking the handoff or the pitch and keep it. He's had to do a lot of stuff. And I've gained a lot of respect for him because he hadn't complained. He hadn't gotten in guys' faces. He just keeps plugging along. Phil Longo, the offensive coordinator, likes to say, Sam could throw touchdown passes in 5 straight possessions or throw picks in 5 straight possessions. When he comes to the sideline, you don't know the difference. And some people might say you got to have a Phillip Rivers guy who screams and yells and smacks fannies. And I agree that if that's the guy's personality, then that's what he needs to be. But it also says a lot for a guy who doesn't get down. And I mentioned earlier about this team has overcome some pretty big deficits at times this year. I think part of that is because a guy like Sam never gets stressed. He just keeps pushing forward. And that's an attribute. And I think that's what a lot of NFL teams are going to like about him, because it's a long season in the NFL. And you need a guy that's not up and down like this. You need a guy who's just humming along. And that's what Sam is.
I'll give you a quick Sam Howell story. So Langston Wirtz, the accomplished writer for the Charlotte Observer, did a story about Sam Howell when he was a freshman at Sun Valley High School. And it piqued my interest. There hasn't been many freshman quarterbacks in the state who was putting up the numbers that Sam did that year. So I think I went and I went and I watched him against Concord High School, which was the first round of the playoffs, I believe. And Concord had Rick Sandridge, who's now a defensive tackle at South Carolina, and they had Namza Hamzaudeen, if I'm even pronouncing that even close to being correct, who ended up going to Florida State. At the time, I think Hamza's best offer was East Carolina. So he blew up much later after that playoff game. But I'm telling you, like Sam as a freshman in high school was not much different than Sam as a freshman at UNC. I mean, the only question with Sam was, would he be able to see over the big, tall defensive lineman? I mean, that was when he was a freshman in high school. Like that was the only doubts because he was so polished at a young age, had a strong arm. And you mentioned his baseball background. I think he told me back then he was throwing like 90 as a pitcher.
Yeah.
You know, I believe his dad wrestled at Appalachian State. Mom maybe played volleyball at Appalachian
I think so. Yeah.
State.
Yeah.
You know, and it was clear in the beginning that he really liked Walt Bell, who was the offensive coordinator at Maryland. Then he gets hired at Florida State as offensive coordinator, commits to Florida State because of Walt Bell. Then he gets hired as head coach at UMass. Sam decommits from Florida State, and the rest is history for the UNC end. But I think everyone realizes that if Sam had not gone to UNC, these last few years might have been really difficult because maybe they would have gotten a quarterback in the portal. But, you know, we both know what the quarterback position was like at UNC pre-Sam Howell.
I thought Jace Ruder could have been a pretty good player. And you know how guys are in college, that if their time comes and they don't get the opportunity, then it never comes, or when it does, maybe they're a different mindset. Mindset is so important in football. But I agree with you. I think Sam was a godsend for this program, and Mac's biggest victory was he and Longo going to Sam's house and being able to talk him into going to Carolina. That was number one. Now they've been able to fill in a lot of cracks since then, but they really needed that one then. I think if Sam's not there and they struggle to get to a bowl game, they had to close strong to get to a bowl game that first year. And it was just a military bowl, but they treated it like the Orange Bowl. And I understand why. And it made a lot of sense. I mean, you're selling. Mac's a salesman, right? He's selling a program. He's selling a brand. He's selling the full experience and all of its nuances. So yeah, you sell the crap out of that. But you had a guy that everyone wanted to watch every week. People turn on the TV and watch North Carolina football that maybe previously didn't give a crap because, man, that quarterback's interesting. And he's really good. And he could do a lot of different things. And it's seen, even as a guy who's covered him and been around him so much, he just gets better and better and better and adds to this game. Again, I compare him to Russell Wilson. Russell did that as well. And Russell walked as a junior and left after his third year. We know all that stuff that went down with TOB and then Mike Glenn and everything else. So Sam will play this week. He obviously is leaving. He'll be gone, and they'll have a new quarterback next year, which I project will be Drake May. And I think they'll be in pretty good hands with Drake. But I remember, by the way, back when Sam was a freshman, I remember doing an interview with him. And it was just through Twitter DM. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I told my wife, I got any of this freshman in high school. And my wife's like, oh, really? I said, yeah. I said, well, we'll see how it goes. Because that's not what I've been doing in my career until I got into this job, as you know, JC. And he was so polished. I thought to myself, I'm talking to a 21-year-old. So he had the goods a long time ago, and he still has the goods. And it's fascinating to watch him navigate through this whole process and literally just not get wobbled much at all. He's just straight down the pike.
Yeah, I think the last time I saw him in high school might have been against Emeka Emezi. But I
remember what I remember watching him at one of the Carolina camps, and Carolina, whatever Larry Fedora was thinking, I don't know. I think they probably should have gone after him a little bit harder. But didn't he have I'm trying to think. I'm getting confused there with something, but I remember a couple of the guys that NC State has now that I've seen at Carolina camps before, and I thought, and I remember Dina talking about how they had to go after these guys a little bit more, and they have it, and now they're playing big time roles at NC. I think college football in this area is so much better when the Wolfpack and Tar Heels are good. You know that I spent a lot of time covering NC State, and when that place is full and is optimistic, it is an awesome place to watch a football game. So I can't wait to get back in there Friday night and see everybody over at NC State and just see that place. And I think it's going to be a good game. I think Carolina has a chance to be in this game because of their ability to score, but I think NC State's a better football team in most phases, and certainly State's opportunistic ability to move the ball and the way Devin Leary is playing, I just think that's too much for the Tar Heels.
Sure. Where can Wolfpack fans see your updates on Twitter?
At Heel Illustrated, and we'll be there a couple hours ahead of time shooting stuff and letting everybody know what's going on. And This is a fun week when you're a neutral observer like you and me. It's a fun week where we sit and watch the fans go back and forth because there is a lot of angst between the two fan bases, and that makes it fun, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's truly a 365-day a year rivalry between the sports, and I think everybody understands that in the area, and that's what makes the Triangle special, is that they actually care about college sports every day of the year. But thank you for taking time. This is Andrew Jones of Tar Heel Illustrated, part of the Rivals.com network, and I'm sure we'll have a lot of post-game coverage, and as will we, and we'll see how this goes. Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to seeing you Friday night, my friend.
Later.